welcome back to the SBP Podcast Mobile Filmmaking. I'm your host, Susie Botello, and you are listening to episode 167. Hey, it's another edition of our Fade into Film panel discussions. We have Joey Min and Ryan McDonald with us. Levi Austin Morris is traveling back from Australia, where he picked up the Best Feature Film Award for his film Paralysis. I am not at all surprised. Probably you aren't either. It's such a great film. The other thing is that Jason Rivera is not with us. He had a family emergency, and it's going to take a while, so he may not be coming back. So on behalf of all of us, I just want to wish you and your family the very best and cross our fingers that everything turns out okay. Thanks for being on the panel, Jason. We love you, and we hope to have you back sometime. All right, now listen, we're going to be talking about something really cool for this episode. We're going to be discussing where story ideas come from and how you turn those story ideas into screenplays, how you choose one to turn them into a screenplay to produce the film. Because, you know, that's not what happens in Hollywood. In Hollywood, either you write the screenplay and then you sell it, and then the studio turns that into a film, or you write and direct the film. It can be either or. In any case, we don't do that in indie filmmaking all the time. Actually, a lot of times we come up with the screenplays, we write them, and we intend to produce them. It's actually pretty much a common way that we make mobile films. This is how we do it. We write and we create. And no, we don't play all the parts as characters. Now, talking about narrative filmmaking, where do these ideas come from? We're going to discuss this together, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And we're going to give you some tips from Joey and Ryan also in how they do it. I'm working on a documentary myself, and I'll be able to share and pitch in a little bit here and there. Usually, you know, I pitch in anyways. In any case, let's go and talk to the guys now. What do you say?
We are Fade into Film.
Hey, Joey, Ryan, welcome back to the show. How are you guys doing?
Doing good, yeah.
It's cold as hell.
Oh, no, that's right. You're in New Jersey.
I'm back in Jersey.
In Jersey. Is it freezing? Like, are the water pipes frozen?
I think after a month of living in Atlanta, I kind of like the weather. Now I'm back here, and it's fucking freezing.
Yeah, it's been dry and very warm here. It's been like 80 or something in San Diego. Come back, Joey. Come back. The waves are calling you.
Oh, gosh. Oh, gosh. I possibly might be in the area in like a couple weeks. I don't know.
Oh, possibly. That's awesome.
I don't know.
You might be here in April, too.
Might be there in April. Definitely.
And Ryan.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
All right. I'm sounding funny now. So guys, welcome and thanks for being here. We're going to be discussing something that I think is really cool. It's going to be a lot of fun. And that is, where do the stories come from that we write about and then produce into films? Because it's a little different than obviously what happens in Hollywood. I want to share that with you along with Joey, and we're going to go really deep into this. And I guess we should start with where your past ideas came from for your films, both of you. Joey, your feature film that you shot, where did you get the idea for that? And tell us a little bit about that film.
Wait a minute. I want to ask a question first before. So when you say that it's different in Hollywood, why would you say that? Just in case, for people that might not know, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a very good question. I'm glad. Thank you for having me on your show.
No problem.
No, actually, the reason I say that is because screenwriters usually write a screenplay, and they're very concerned about how they write that particular screenplay, but they put their heart and soul into that story that they're writing about, and then they sell it, or they try to. And then a producer, they pitch it to the executive producers who want to turn that screenplay into a film. And then sometime down the line, the producer says, okay, yeah, we'll do it. Here's what we'll give you for it. And now it's ours. And then the director has their own vision and they change it. And the producers and the studios tend to make changes on top of what the director's vision is. So that's really why I say in Hollywood, normally the person who writes the screenplay most of the time, not always, is not the person who produces. And when I say producer, I'm not really assigning that title. I'm saying, the filmmaker.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? I think like many years ago, or I wrote this, this script. Right. And a friend of mine thought it was good enough that he was pitching it around. And there was a studio that was like, they were willing to buy it. And, okay, we'll buy for like 75 grand. But of course, me, like, I want to be like, well, I want to be part of the process. Right. And they're like, no. Right. So I lost that. And I always kind of like in the back of my mind, I kind of regretted that because like 75 grand would have helped me. I would have like I eventually made that script, but obviously thinking about it,
Yeah, you feel like you missed out. Like, and that's the turmoil part of it, because you do get attached to your stories.
Yeah.
It's one of the breakthroughs of mobile filmmaking, right? That now the person, you can, as a mobile filmmaker, you have control. It's your story. And if you own it in every way, right? From beginning to end, depending on what you decide to do as far as distribution is concerned, but you own the story. You wrap it. It's yours.
Yeah.
If you want to give it away later, fine, but they have to take what you've already wrapped up for the most part.
But isn't that kind of also, I guess, the idea I think everyone has like, stories that they would like to tell. It's just, but like to execute it, right? Like that's kind of like, you kind of have to put that into consideration as well, right?
Yeah. I do, especially on LinkedIn, once in a while I get messages from people that they tell me, hey, I'm a screenwriter and I've got all sorts of, I'm cranking out these screenplays, I can't remember. I remember one guy telling me he had so many screenplays over the years that they're just a pile of them. And I don't want to put, I don't remember exactly the number, but for me in my brain, I was like, oh my God, that's a lot of screenplays. They're just sitting there. They're just stories just sitting there. And he said, do you know anybody who would want to buy them? And I'm like, no, what do I look like? And I'm like, I have no idea. And then I said, but you have a phone, people, in the industry, like you just approached me. Why don't you approach someone to ask them to turn that story into a movie instead of trying to sell it to an executive somewhere, a producer?
Mm.
What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, Joe. I probably would have sold my script.
Yeah, I would have. I should have.
I've heard from other people before though. Yeah, it's kind of like, well, it's your baby, and so they don't want to let it go. And I don't know. Sometimes for the right price, I probably would sell that baby, and then use the money to then like make like your own.
I don't think it's so much the selling the baby thing though, guys. I think what happens is that when you see it made and it hurts how much they've torn it up. You want to see that story, even if they make changes for the most part that they're going to make. Okay, well, it's a studio, this and that, marketability. But when they really tear it up and they take out the most crucial parts, right, that you feel that really could have, like we've been talking for a while, all of us, about the heart of the story, basically, right? Really good stories that captivate people, and if they take that out and then all of a sudden the story sucks, but it makes, they think they're going to make a lot of money in Hollywood, but then the audience themselves, written by, right? And they're going, that sucked.
I mean, I think we've seen
right?
both of those scenarios play out differently. Like, because if you like, if we look at like Jaws, Spielberg takes Jaws or Jurassic Park, and like they're not necessarily like the book, but they do come out well. And so I think it's possible.
They're never like the book.
But I think it's possible that sometimes the thing that I see is like if I write it and I don't allow anyone else to give me feedback or criticism or anything like that, how it could suck. Just because I wrote it doesn't mean that it's going to be good, though. And I think that you need to have a healthy gauge also of other people reading your script and giving you feedback. And but there are a lot of bad movies. There are a lot of bad movies out there, and the credit for writing that story goes to the screenwriter. And the general public doesn't realize that the studios and the directors and the producers, they had a hand in it. And sometimes it could have been a great, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. You've got a great screenplay. You've already checked in with people. Everybody's like, oh, this is great. And then you sell it. You got your $75,000, but then you see that play out and everybody's giving it really bad reviews. I'm not talking about book adaptations in Hollywood. I'm not talking about Jurassic Park or anything. I'm kind of talking about middle of the line movies that really turn out pretty bad.
But I could have taken that $75,000 and make my next script actually doable.
Exactly,
right?
And then own it.
Because like I honestly watched the thing with that script that we made that was I was able to sell for $75,000. I did it myself because they turned me down because I said I wanted to be part of whatever. And then, I saw what I did with it. And it's like, yeah, it's close to the script, but the execution wise, it's terrible because I didn't have the money, right, for certain things. So, so that's it. I think it's just because, in the beginning, it's definitely, it was the feeling of like, oh my God, this could be my break, right? Like, yeah. And I never really, I wasn't thinking in like, I wrote this story and I'm sure I could write more stories. Like I shouldn't doubt myself,
I'm pretty sure, yes. So let's talk about that. Let's go to the, let's start back where we were going to start. Yeah, where do ideas come from? Joey, where do your ideas, that's where we were.
Okay. Right. Sorry. So back.
Go ahead.
I think the silliness of it all, I think, was that I like making small town stories, right? And, small town stories back in the 90s, 80s, it's always like, oh, no, like there's like this evil crime syndicate or something of some sort of group invades a small town and they start putting their, clutches on the people. And, there's like a unlikely hero that kind of saves the day. And I just thought about flipping the ideas before, like it's always like back in the 80s, 90s, like, oh, there's this crime syndicate that's peddling this new type of drug and it's affecting the kids, right? But my area that I live in, it's a lot of like retirement homes. And I just had this thought of like, well, wouldn't the drug cartel be more like it would go under the radar if you sell it to old retired people because they're the most medicated people anyway. So if they OD'd, I think it's just part, and they're about to die anyway.
They can get away with it.
Yeah, right. So I had this whole like crime idea that I was like talking to my group and I'm like, we have to sell drugs to old people. And now
and the neighbors are like, "What?"
Yeah, we were writing the script at an IHOP, and people were hearing us, and like the manager was like, "What the fuck are you guys talking about?" And they had to explain to them. They thought it was pretty funny. So that was the concept, So hence why like our hero is an old Asian lady that does kung fu and all that stuff. So that's the.
So you started to get your idea, basically. I'm just trying to break this down for our listeners a little bit.
Yeah.
So you start getting the ideas from films that you've already watched, right?
Yeah.
And these things that constantly happen,
Right.
And basically, you're like, what if?
Yeah, it's kind of like
that?
I'm doing a parody of a parody of a parody until a point where it goes like almost full circle. And it still has the same
like
story beats.
Inception parody style.
Yeah, almost, right? And then the concept, it's like, and I think for our movie too, I think one of the actors, when I presented to him, because he's also a filmmaker, this one guy in our thing, and he was like, I really like the idea that you guys took a joke and ran with it as far as possible.
Yes.
And, and that's really just the conception of it all.
It's the running with it part that gives you the concept because you really don't know until you're running with it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's the fun part. I think creating worlds like that, right?
Totally. Yeah, because an idea starts as an idea, and then you go to develop the idea, the development of it, and then that turns into, like what you were saying, just moving it along, and then it becomes a strategy, how you're going to tell that story in the storyline. Ryan, what about you?
I don't know. Sometimes the ideas can come from. Sometimes it'll be like a movie that I watch, and it'll be like, man, I really like the tone of that film, and I would love to do something like gritty. And so you kind of, I don't know, you start playing around with characters in your mind. Sometimes this actually just happened recently. Sophia, my daughter, she wrote her script for her part 2 of the Sister Jinx the other day.
Nice.
And I was telling her that I was explaining to her that there's. Everybody has like different like thinking places, and sometimes it could be like driving in your car, or other times it could be like in the shower. And I'd actually had this in the same day while she was writing her thing. I had like a breakthrough idea on the script that I was working on and trying to figure out what was not working in the script that I'm writing. And the idea came to me in the shower, and I just know that's kind of like my thinking space when ideas come. Usually, and then, or if I'm driving in the car. So sometimes kind of like that. Now, obviously, with my feature film, I pulled from my real life, some of the scenarios that happened in the film, or conversations and arguments that I had. Some of them, it's like a mashup of different friends of mine that were married, and me kind of putting that together. But also, I knew my parameters. I wanted something that we could film relatively cheap, shoot in one location, and have a minimal number of actors. So kind of like having that limitation on there. I actually think those things kind of help be more creative.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that, like all directors for the most part, right, even try to put a little piece of themselves in it. And I don't mean by like putting their character or something like that, just their own experiences and their own feelings and perspectives, a little bit inside of their films. Like there's something with Stephen King films where he tends to always throw kids in there, in his horror films. And sometimes they end up being the protagonist that you didn't know was the protagonist until you get some, way into it. Steven Spielberg puts in the bullyism, the bullies type of a thing. With kids and things like that, and also the whole other things like as well.
Divorce
Joey,
parents, things like that.
Yeah. Joey, did you have any personal thing that you noticed when you were making your film that played a part in it?
Like in terms of what though? What do you mean by personal?
Well, like what I was just saying, usually in the concept of the stories at some point, when they're writing the screenplays or when they're starting to think about how the story is going to shape when they're directing, usually they there's always a connection to the actual director.
Oh, I think I guess it's just like the concept. Like I started noticing more of like, the area that I lived in, like these, all these retirement homes and stuff like that. And just seeing where and how aging people kind of, how they congregate in certain places and stuff like that. I became more mentally aware because I've been paying attention more. And and I guess in
That's
a
what
weird
I'm looking
way.
for. I'm going to play your psychologist here. So,
And it's just,
so
I guess,
Joey, why is that so important to you? Why
well,
is there
'cause
such a, the whole issue of basically abusing probably elderly people or taking advantage of it? Why is that important to you?
it's the research. I need to make this drug cartel actually real, like realistic enough that it makes sense for the story
Yeah.
to work the way that it does, right? No matter how goofy my characters are or whatnot, it's like why does this world even make sense? I'm like, oh my god,
Right.
like that makes sense. And then to a point where like, why are there drug cartels that actually sell to old people? Like it makes so much sense to me. So that's what
Oh
I'm thinking.
yeah. I remember working not working, sorry. This girl that I knew who said her uncle was a legal drug dealer. And I go, "What?" And she says, "Yes, he works for pharmaceutical companies as a salesperson. And he goes and he shows up to all the doctors' offices and gives them samples of drugs to give to their patients."
Yeah, that's what I was
And
thinking though. Like like super designer drugs for like retirement people. Like that's the funny concept. I called my drug bingo in my movie, right? Because like that just it just fits,
call it
right?
bingo.
Yeah, and it's their modified Smarties, the candies, and so they look like bingo tiles, right?
Yeah.
To me, it makes a lot of sense. I'm
That's
just saying.
true. Yeah.
So but that's why I think it's the believing enough in the world that you create, right? It really helps push the narrative of the story so far, right? Like I think that's what really helps.
So we had a filmmaker that came out to our film festival in 2018, and he won the award for short film. Anyways, he was talking about how he got this idea, and it was during that shooting that happened at the movie theater. I forgot where it was now, but it was a big deal, and it stirred up a lot of fear from people about going to outdoor places and being shot, right? And I think it was the one with
Dark Knight.
the
It was the
Batman
Dark Knight
movies.
Rises. I think it was in Colorado, I believe.
Yeah. So this guy is in Canada, and he watches that, and he's looking through that story, and he started thinking in his mind, okay, he was with his mom. He went to a theater to watch a movie, and he's sitting there, and his brain just kind of went like, oh my God, what if that happened here? And he started thinking about scenarios, how he would get out, what he would do. And then he went home and he thought, this actually might, you know what? I'm going to make a film about this. And so he made a short film. And so he went, I'll put a little link to it in the notes. And he basically made the short film, and it was hilarious and it was funny. But at the same time, it was kind of cool that he came up with an idea from something like that. And it was, I think, one of the best and the most popular ways that we come up with ideas for stories and films is we do that what if. It's probably the most popular thing. Like we witness something and we go, what if, for me, a lot of times, probably because I love to take pictures of places and things like that too, landscape pictures, things like that. I'm always thinking about locations, stirring up ideas for movies. Like, have you ever done that? Either one of you can answer that. Like, have you ever gone somewhere and said, this would be a great location for making a movie?
Oh yeah, and the city that I live in, Ogden, I mean, it's got some historical aspects to it and old buildings, and so it's constantly kind of like looking around and going like, God, I would love to film something here at this spot. or especially in also one of the things about the landscape here is you can there's a lot of like flat land, kind of like plains, but then also we're in the Rocky Mountains as well. So like so everything can easily mask as something else, as a different state or a different place. And so that's oftentimes it's like, God, this is a great spot. I'd love to put something here. Now I got to come up with a story that guides me here somehow.
Has it ever happened to you where that's where the story transforms, just sitting there looking at something and going, this story just erupts from it?
Depending the type of genre that, most people like, most filmmakers, like, they usually kind of acclimate to one. Like, is there like an idea usually that comes up? Like, is it through experience or something? Because I know for me, like, since we do a lot of comedy and like, lighthearted comedy, a movie usually stems from a joke, like a simple joke, and it becomes a concept. And
that's what I was talking about before, that a lot of times there is some connection to you, the person that comes up with the idea, Ryan?
Yeah, well, and I mean, the last two short films that I've directed have both been horror films, but they're not really like scary horror. Like I like comedy horror, and so and then some of it is like the Moon's Blood one, where it's like the reason why the Wolfman shows up isn't because of the moon. So I tried to take something and kind of like twist it enough to make it where it's an old story the story of a guy turning into a werewolf we've seen before, but it's like, how do I change that into making it something that's more original and also funny in what I think is way. And then when it comes to the way that the blocking is, and Joey, you do this a lot more than I do, obviously. But I have to stand up and kind of like, I was speaking with my wife, Brandy, who's been on the podcast before, but I'll be chatting with her and kind of just saying out loud what's going to happen next. I was like, and then he rips his arm off and he pulls the guy's heart out and throws it at, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I needed. Kind of speaking out loud. And then sometimes there's situational things, like we watched a lot of Larry David stuff as well, Curb Your Enthusiasm. And so there's earlier today we were at a funeral, and there was a scenario where a guy came out of the bathroom, and I was really hoping that he had only gone number one in there, but when I went in, I found out that he didn't. And I was like, that's such an odd time and place to do that at the funeral home. And then when I left the bathroom, I was like, the next person is going to like think that was me because of how the stench that was in the bathroom. And sure enough, someone else is walking by. I'm like, God damn it. Like they think it's me though, but it wasn't me. And saying that out loud prompts my wife, Brandy, to be like, it's really funny. Like we should do a skit or something like that around that idea, something like that happening. So they kind of come to you. These ideas come to you at random moments, by situational things that happen that are, kind of like not really expecting it, right?
Right. I think that's pretty funny, actually, what you said there. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's like there are little things that happen that you can make into like, wait a minute, I could make a movie out of that.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so the other part of the ideas is, how do you figure out whether it's a good enough idea that you want to write a screenplay for? Of course, maybe we should distinguish this into two things: for a short film and for a feature-length film. As curator of the International Mobile Film Festival, now going into our 13th edition, I could tell you there are a lot of short films I've watched, and there are numerous feature films I've watched. And the distinction between the two, both of them are obviously they want to entertain and captivate the audience. The difference between the two, though, and it is harder with a feature-length film than it is with a short film to captivate an audience and hold them and take them for a ride where you're just going up and down and around and this way and that way for, 90 minutes, as opposed to, a 10-minute movie or a 5-minute movie, right? What I notice from short films, though, is that they tend to be very message-driven. They tend to have a really big punch at the end and, kind of like commercials in a way, that they have to kind of tighten everything up and tell a short story, and they want to make a big impact. with a short film. So maybe in thinking that way, how do you go and say, all right, I got this idea for a movie. It's going to be a short film, and I'm going to make this into a film. Like, I'm literally going to make this into a film. What happens in your thought process at that point? I mean, I have my own ideas, but what happens in your thought process? You've made like 7 short films this year, right?
Well, no, not really, but yeah, I've been involved in.
No, he's like, no, not really. I've only made 6.
It depends on how much meat's on the bone, really. Like, and I've started plenty of screenplays, feature lengths that I think are a feature length idea, and I start getting into it, and I realize that I just don't have enough information to make this last. Or I don't have it really like fleshed out all the way to make it all the way to the end. So that's one thing. That's one thing I find out is how I know it's going to go from a short to a feature. I think that you're pretty close on that. Like, there's not a whole lot of like completely message driven feature films, and it does tend to be in the shorts. But I also find a lot of people, we'll meet people who have they have a feature film idea, but as they're telling it to you, you can just tell that it's a short film. They just don't realize it yet. Because it depends on, is there enough information to really pull the story through an entire, 60, 70 minutes or 90 minutes, where it would be worthwhile. And
do you ever watch that movie Crash?
I've seen both. Yeah. Like, I've seen the David Cronenberg one, and I've seen the why does his name escape me?
Because they're basically telling stories of basing them around characters.
I guess that's what it was. Yes.
Yeah, and then they all kind of merge. They're different stories. They each have their own plots, and then they all kind of end up coming together. Mm-hmm. And I think that's another way of approaching, instead of just taking one story and have that one story captivate everybody throughout the entire 90 minutes or 2 hours, that they took that and they said, okay, we have these different characters. They're each going through a thing. And what was the one where they were, it was raining frogs
Magnolia.
or something through it. I forgot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they all kind of end up with that same scenario. I thought that was genius.
Yeah, that's actually it. My friends, we've talked about trying to do like an anthology film where it's like each of us just comes up with a short and then we put them all together for one big horror film. But that's how I did Married and Loving It. Was I was thinking of, I came up with 5 different scenes, and I was like, I've shot enough short films to know that I can do these and I could probably shoot each of these pieces in a day or so. And I was like, I'll just tackle each one like they're an individual short film and then put them together. So it's kind of what it is. That's why there's really only 5 scenes in the movie. It's just that each scene, the challenging part then was actually, how do I make the scene go, 15 pages or so.
And then on top of that, once you've got the story, you've got to think about, okay, I'm going to produce this. I got to come up with the locations. Can I do that? We talked about this in our last session, but we can talk about this because that's a big part of it too, where you're thinking as a producer, you're thinking about all these other things. Joey.
Yes.
What's your take on this?
Because I don't know. Actually,
how
sometimes
do you decide? How do you go, okay, this is a great idea. These are some great ideas for films. Now I'm going to write a screenplay and produce it.
I think if it's something that I guess it's kind of like what you said. It does start with a message, and then it kind of evolves from it. Or sometimes, like, I have this. Actually, it's funny. Like, during this last production I was working on, there's this boom guy. His name, the nickname is Angry Dave, but when he's not angry, he's Calm Nick. I don't know how that works, but that's what it is, right? And I just had this idea about it's so funny, like, seeing him operate his the boom and whatnot, and I was like, oh man, that'd be a funny idea if like I wrote a story about like it's a boom operator and he's like a kung fu master and he knows like how to stick fight or something and like what adventures happen, right? And I guess like kind of I was like talking to Steph about it and we had this really funny idea that we just kind of evolved from this character, which was like an idea but actually spawned like a story that we were thinking about before, like years ago. We had like an idea that we wrote down, but now it kind of had idea of this person being a boom operator kind of just gave the world some, I guess, like some tangible qualities that we were able to really keep talking about, like that idea before. So, I mean, that's one of the ways that how we create stuff. And I'm not sure if I would write a full story
Feature.
to this, but the concept is just, it's a nice thing to have,
I think also sometimes you have stories that have been developing in your head and then you just kind of drop them. You're like, I don't know where I would go from here on that. And you just kind of drop it and then something else happens maybe months later, sometimes even a year later, and you go, oh my God, you're tying it up. So sometimes it takes longer and you're going and you're continuing your story. It's just like you keep dropping it and then picks up again. You drop it, picks up again. And the next thing you know, you got a whole thing.
Exactly. I mean, sometimes it just takes time for an idea to cook until, you experience more of the world and somehow create something that actually works.
Yeah. I also think this happened with Ryan with your film because you started it and then you had to redo it or something, right?
Yeah, I spoke about this on one of the last episodes. It wasn't one of my films. It was a friend of mine. It was his film, his feature film, and we did a kind of a screening just as just screening the movie, just a few of us to kind of see, what's working in the movie, what's not, and it was pretty clear that one of the actors needed it wasn't their best. And it was pretty clear throughout the whole movie. So there was kind of so we kind of came up with the battle plan as far as like, where can we do just insert shots that are close-ups of that one actor and then just spend time getting the better performance out of them because they are in the movie like the entire time, almost of the entire film. So it was kind of like reshooting those pieces. We had left open, when I did Married and Loving It, we had left open the idea that there would be some reshoots, but what we shot is what's in the movie actually. So I'm pretty happy with what we got. And
and reshoots are not the same thing as the story, like adding a part to a story, right? Oh, I'm sure there's somebody listening out there who's going, well, actually that's happened to me where we shot the movie and then we created an entire new scene because we realized the story wasn't flowing as it should. It wasn't telling itself properly.
And I find the last two horror films I've done, I've actually had to, while we're editing, I can tell that I'm like missing a few shots that aren't setting it up better. And so then we have to run back out and shoot something really quickly because on those moments where I'm doing it for another competition, so I have a deadline that I'm on. In the case of the story I was saying is though, no, we reshot that person's like scenes and we didn't come up with it wasn't anything new that came up. It was more of like, we just need more time with a better performance from that person. So,
that's usually what happens.
But anyway, but it got done and worked out. So
yeah, it got done. So in tying this, for you guys who are listening, you're listening to all these story ideas and how these things are developing. And what I'm hoping is that that's actually stirring up your creativity and imagination in you so that will help you in coming up with more stories. Sometimes it's like a journey, like a path you're taking from your brain as you're going down the line because you are storytelling. And it's one thing to tell a story. Have you ever, Ryan, because of your daughters and stuff, decided to just make up a story to tell your kids because you don't feel like sitting down and reading a book and you're just moving it along?
Oh, yeah. There was, there was a time where I was reading like these like Teddy Ruxpin books, and to Sophia when she was really little, and she couldn't read, so she didn't know at the time because she was only like 2. So like she couldn't tell. I just got so tired of the stories that were in. I was just making it up and pretending as though I was reading it, because it just would go, and there was like 40 pages sometimes, and I was like, so I would like grab 3 pages at a time and just kind of like, and then now they went over here and they did this. She didn't know any different. So
yeah, I've written. I've done that too. Written short stories for like I remember one of my friends had a little kid and she said, my kid loves she'd put him on the phone. So I would make up stories, to tell them and stuff like that, just for entertaining. But telling a story to a little kid sometimes doesn't have to have the complicated, strategy that it does, for an adult or for a grown up. It's all about entertaining for them. They're not keeping track of anything. You know what I mean? But I would also write them for them. And then I did that a few times, exactly what you're talking about. When you're at somebody's house and they're like, oh, read me a book. You're like, oh, this book. and then you just make it up. So, yeah, I think so now, before we go too much into this, let's just go to the end here and say, okay, you're taking your concepts, you're running them through your friends. Is that what you do? You run them through friends and contacts, your crew, your team, and you say, hey, I'm thinking about making, to me, I would think you would do it before you write the screenplay, right? But I could be wrong, where at least you have a treatment for it and you say, I'm going to write, or an outline at least. This is the story. What do you guys think? Should I write a screenplay for this and we can make it? Or what do you guys think?
I've gone both ways because there's been so many times I've spent 20 minutes telling somebody this idea and I'm like, oh my gosh, it'd be such a great idea, and then it fizzles by the next day and I realize I'm not really that in love with it, and so I kind of feel like I wasted their time by explaining the whole thing. So I've done both, but I try to be conscious about how much talking I'm doing about it and compared to how much writing I'm actually doing about it. But if you're trying to bounce an idea off somebody, if you're, it is best, I think, to always bounce an idea off of your trusted comrades, because then because especially if it's like in a comedy sense, if they're laughing and you're laughing, then it's probably going to be funny, at least to the two of you. And you should be making whatever you're writing, it should be for yourself. And hopefully other people will just enjoy it. Yeah,
that's what I was going to say too. In the end, it kind of feels like you're trying to get validation from. I'm pretty stubborn once I get an idea stuck, as far as like, my documentary, for example, this documentary that I'm making, it's going to be a series, because I know I'm being realistic that with the film festival and the podcast, there's no way I'm going to be making a feature-length documentary that's ever going to get done. And so I'm thinking about 6 different stories around that same topic of art and community. The one thing that I know is that I have a connection, as I'm coming up with each episode, a connection to making each one of those happen. I have, the stubborn part of me is I'm not making something that I don't know anyone that can connect me to the right people to make this happen. I do have that. I'm not lacking that confidence. I'm not looking for validation. I'm just looking for my resources right now so that I can make it happen. But it's not the other way around. Joey?
Mm-hmm.
Are we bothering you?
No. Right here, listening.
So on your end, you have an entire team of people that you're constantly having communication with about each and every project and things like that. And I know that you have, the YouTube channel?
Define entire team, because it's only really just
the 600 people that you have.
Just Steph and I, really.
Yeah. So the art school dropouts, you work with at least 4 or 5 people, right?
No, it's actually just Steph and I.
There are sometimes I see a few other people involved in that.
Yeah, like we have, I guess, other people that we kind of reach out to when we, once we start executing a script or something. But it really is just
that's what I'm talking about right there.
Yeah, but like the conception of stuff, it's really just Steph and I. I'm like the creative, and she's the logistics, I guess.
Right. So you have a little bit of a pool of people that once you've decided, okay, we're going to do this, then you can reach out to these people as, okay, we're going to do this. You want to be a part of it?
Yes. Yes, definitely.
And then at that point, there's a conversation that happens like, what do you mean, do I want to be a part of what? Do they ever have any input?
Oh, yeah, of course. I think, that is the spirit of collaboration.
Right.
I think, though, usually a lot of the stuff that I've kind of given is kind of already fleshed out, and they would like look at it, or they would like read it, and if it's, oh, that's funny, or oh, that's pretty cool, and then we just kind of go on from there, really.
Yeah.
That's like I think why I know it's different for other YouTubers, because I've also have friends that are YouTubers and that are much more I guess in line with the whole idea of the algorithm. Like they create content for the algorithm, and I really hate saying that, because it just makes our art form just like a product by saying content, but to them it is content.
Content is not devalued just by the word itself.
Yeah. But they study like the trends. They have like this whole formula. They have all of these tools and apps to, give them numbers and derivatives and data of what is trending. And, a lot of how what video they make next is kind of based on
science.
Yeah, it's actually both interesting, and it's a mini Hollywood if you really think about it, right?
Right. Yeah.
Probably even actually, I can't even say it's a mini Hollywood. It's probably just as big. And I think after working this last production, it's the idea of like, I guess hearing some, how producers think, and how they, I guess a lot of the older producers that have been in the business for a long time, they don't realize how big of a machine like YouTube and social media videos are, right? And
yeah, no, definitely. There is a lot of behind the scenes that are not really obvious. It just looks like, oh, somebody threw some stuff together and they're just having fun, and then that's it.
Yeah,
and it's not.
It's just a different markets that I'm pretty sure if they understood how both would work, there's going to be a producer or like a money guy that's going to come up through the ranks of like Hollywood that knows how to implement both, like mass media, like movie consumption, as well as social media marketing.
It's called AI.
I don't think so.
Bad word.
I doubt it.
AI will do it.
I don't know. I don't think so. It's. I think there's too much human part.
Fed.
No. I think like I've been thinking about it and just seeing how everyone works. Like I get the idea of the machine and algorithm and Hollywood and numbers and all of that, but to actually navigate that and to put that together, you need a very human person to think that way through. Like, I don't think AI will ever be able to connect what makes something trending. I think it could tell you what's trending, but to actually predict what will be trending, you really need a human for that.
And I'm almost thinking like, okay, an Excel spreadsheet, one of the most boring documents, but there's so many formulas, right, that you create that are connected to these other things, and then you connect things to it. And it just, if you close your eyes for a second and think about the last cell at the bottom, that the conclusion this whole mess of formulas, the result that you want at the end, it sort of navigates itself from all these little formulas down to it. And I think a lot of apps and software kind of tend to do that in that sense. And to me, it's kind of like if you go to Google and you put in a search for something, it's like a going into the universe and saying, wish upon a star. You know what I'm saying? And being able
but it
to
could
say,
only really
"That's Venus."
regurgitate something that is already been made, that has been proven,
that's what I'm
right?
saying, that it's taking data that's already there.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. I feel like it would never replace the idea of a human person actually navigating and actually combining and making a new neural pathway, you know, if we were talking about that.
Yeah, I'm definitely not a neuropath, a new one, but I think it could take everything as a formula like algebra and then come up with the answer at the end.
Yeah, but I think that's the thing that I'm saying, is that like the answer at the end is always going to be the same answer, right? But we're in the business of telling stories, right? And what makes it, you know, what stories are inherently human. And
I think that part you always will need the human, because that's the art. That's the art part.
Even the stories itself, I think by nature itself, like with new experiences happening, like the human part of just telling a story, to be able to tell to other people to understand that story is, you know, like that's always going to evolve, right? There might be some.
I think you're right. That the story part for sure, because that's the art form. That's the human thing right there. But I think to be able to say, with this story versus that story, and what are people seeking, and what pleases people, what makes people click here, what makes people, you know, if you're thinking about it as a business model, like Hollywood, we're talking about mini Hollywood. And I think that's where I was going with this. If you're thinking about it as a business, right, you have the human story, and then you feed it into this thing, and it says, well, this might not, and it includes all the data that it takes a lot of work for people to. I mean, like, I'm just amazed at what you were just saying earlier about having people come together with all of this, you know, all those numbers and statistics and things like that to figure this out on how to play this story, you know, to put it out better and navigate through that. That's incredible. That's impressive.
I think so. That's why, like, yeah. Like, I think I know with all of the talk of AI and stuff, and I know people are scared about it. I don't know how much AI would replace people in films, but I just don't think I just don't think it will completely do it, because there will become a point in time where it's like, yeah, no, I want to see real people doing stuff, right?
Yes.
Because especially in the stunt world, you know how like they have this new thing with like the AI likeness, and it's like, you know, getting digitally scanned.
That is so right now is so it's such that's crazy, because like, remember the making of Titanic?
Mm-hmm.
You ever watch the making of that? Like the CGI, you know, all the people on the ship.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like they took 3 or 4 people and duplicated them to like hundreds, you know, to make it look like, oh, these people are falling off, and these people are just kind of scooting down the boat as it's sinking, and these people are falling off the edge, and these people are just like, you know, and all these things. I think Braveheart was the same way, you know, with Mel Gibson, that movie where they were having these big battles and they were duplicating people to death, and you can't really identify people, especially in motion, you know, identify who is who, but yeah, I mean, it's like, how are you supposed to move up the ranks, you know, if you're just like a bunch of pixels now, you know? I really hope that nobody's misunderstanding what I was saying. I'm not a mathematician. If I could use AI to do all that math for me, hey, right on. But to actually create and write that story and, you know, tell that story, There is no way. I mean, some of you out there may be saying, "Oh yeah, they could write this, they could tell that story." I only think that storytelling from human to human is where we find our connections. And I don't think AI is going to be able to do that.
Because if we're talking about pure algorithm, I mean, yeah, sure, like it's already been done. But then again,
Right.
the audience that absorbs that type of like algorithm media are children, right? Like it's
Yeah.
like you can
really mess up their progress in development.
right. It's like the Rube Goldberg machine where it's like, it's just shit that's moving and kids could just watch it like
Yep.
for hours. It's the same thing with YouTube. Like that's why they have all of these. Like I saw this one channel. It's basically like this dude. He just builds very long, intricate tracks for Hot Wheels, and he puts a GoPro on a Hot Wheel, and boom, it's like 5 million views, and this guy is being sponsored by Domino's Pizza. You know what I mean? Like that is very cool. There is work to it, but like it's something. Is that actual like filmmaking or video or art? Like it's not, but like it still sells to kids, and it sells products, right? So that's what it is. It's kind of like it was that movie Idiocracy. Like it's kind of that, like I'm proud that people can make stuff like that, but if they're kidding themselves that like, yeah, dude, I make Hot Wheels videos and I have the most intellectual people like watching this shit, and I'll be like, okay, dude,
Yeah, I think the development of children's brains is kind of important. Yeah, like Ryan was saying in one of our AI episodes about, SpongeBob, blah, blah, blah. But that's not all you're feeding to kids. We don't want a world that is just all that kids consume is just idiotic slapstick, weak, empty, hollow stories.
But to a lot of companies, it doesn't matter. It's money,
Well, yeah, and that's where the AI would say, well, yeah, if you do it like this, it'll make you money, and then they're going to just go with that. But
Exactly.
The audience is going to miss something from that. So yeah, so I think making people sit through that, I guess if all of society ends up being dumbified, right, to this content constantly, but there's always going to be access to the older content, and then they just won't watch new movies anymore.
I'd like to believe in the I'd like to believe in humanity.
Yes,
right.
me too.
I think there will always be people that are just part of the bell curve, right? The certain part of the bell curve that would be easily appeased to watching trending algorithm based content on YouTube, or forever will enjoy Spider-Man Beginnings number 45.
Gosh.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like we've seen how Spider-Man has been Spider-Man like at least 4 or 5 times now, right?
In 3D and cartoon and everything.
And Marvel will forever pitch the history or the beginning of Spider-Man over and over again, because it's just there's. But that's what I mean though. Like I think you can. I think there's still merits of telling a brand new story, even if it doesn't make money, right? I think there's always merit to telling your own story, right? And I think that's why I love indie film even more after working on stuff like this. It's while I'll be honest, and I'm not gonna not stop working for these productions from time to time, definitely, because it is good money. I think I do want to limit my interaction with the idea of Hollywood, simply because it's like I'm there, and not everybody on set likes film. Like a person that is a PA for the background people are there because it pays, it pays money, and they're just good at hurting people, but have no clue what what a film is. It's like I'm always surprised, like talking to people, and like like a 60 man like production crew,
Right.
and like not a single person knows how to edit something or doesn't understand. Like they'll tell you, they can, like a cam op would know the technicalities of a Sony, uh, you know, Sony camera, but they don't understand how to actually put scenes together or something like that, which is kind of like, to me, sounds weird, right?
That's part of cinematography. From what I learned in school, cinematography is not just about shooting, it's about knowing how you're putting things together, like you just said. And we did that by editing things together with cinematography at the same time, the juxtaposition of shots.
Right.
While you're shooting, I was just saying this in the solo episode in the last one, that when you're shooting something, just as a videographer, you're doing tilts, you're doing pans, you're doing this way, you're doing that way. And you get multiple shots so that when the editor puts it together along with what someone is saying, that they can pick the right shot in there that actually matches. The thing is that the person who is, say, being interviewed or something like that, this is like in a documentary or something, they may be saying, yes, and we were going up this hill. Well, now, you've got this B-roll here, but you've got one where the camera person, instead of going from side to side, they were tilting up on this hill instead of just showing a hill, doing a pan to the left and a pan to the right or going down. So the editor is going to pick that shot that says, oh, and as the person being interviewed, we're going up a hill, the B-roll is showing the camera moving going up the hill. And those things all together, it's very hard for 60 people to see that. But if there's not one person that's getting that, well, this thing is happening, then the result in the end is just going to be shallow. It's just not going to have that strong impact that tells a better story. And I think for our listeners, what we're getting to here is to put the thought of the storytelling that you want to do with the storytelling that you want to actually create. Because there's two parts of this. I've got an idea. I'm telling you a story. I want to tell this story, but how you're going to create that story, now that you're not just handing it off to somebody else, that's on you. So that's got to be part of the decision as well. You guys have anything else to add?
Not too much. I follow what kind of what Joey was saying. I believe a little bit more in the artists in our world, and I think we're just at another crossroads where just like when television was invented and it was like, oh, that's gonna be the death of cinema, and then when home video distribution was invented and that was like gonna be the death of the cinema, and then streaming and now AI, and I don't know. There's like, even with AI, like Chris Nolan and the Quentin Tarantinos and the Joeys and the Ryans and the Susie, we're still going to make movies and be storytellers.
Yeah.
And
there's going to be
we're
people
at the
making
beginning of this whole. Yeah. I mean, AI's been around forever, but we're at the beginning of this concept.
Yeah. And you have AI. A whole list of people who are. I mean, even if you were to go back 20 years, there'd be people who watch dumb crap and find it really entertaining, and people who can't stand it at all. Just like you have now, where there's kids who are watching dumb crap and find it incredibly entertaining, and I don't find it that entertaining at all. I think we're just going through another cycle of this, and if Marvel, I'm picking on them here, but if they want to sell us a completely AI generated Spider-Man movie, whatever, because like they're doing, but you're still going to get your Oppenheimers, your movies. You're still going to have that. And there's even now with like digital, with where people directors have been shooting digital now for years. Michael Mann was one of the first people to do it, but and though the film companies, some of them, like even Kodak, went bankrupt, but there are still purist directors who will shoot on film though. and hasn't necessarily taken away from that either. So I think we're just going through another cycle, and in 10 years, there's going to be something else that we're going to be talking about that's now the newest death of cinema. And
exactly.
I think the thing that's killing it more is just unoriginal ideas, in my opinion. And that's where you're seeing.
That's where we're at. That's where we're at. The original ideas. They come
like
from
lately
people,
with the Marvels
humans.
movie, I didn't see it, but like, when they're going like, oh, it's proof that the box office like lackluster of it all. It's like, it's proof that people are getting superhero fatigue. No, the movie just looks like crap. Like it looks like crap. So no, that's why I didn't go see it. Yeah. It doesn't look very good. Why did people run to go see Oppenheimer? Because it looked really good. Because we know the auteur behind the lens,
And there's another reason though, Ryan. It's because other human beings told them it was really good too.
Well, yeah, and so isn't it interesting? If you make a good movie, people want to go see it. And
right.
So as any time, as we always. There's a million stories of the penny pinchers and the bean counters who think that the one reason why this movie did so really well was because of this, and then they try to replicate it, and it's like that's not actually why that movie did so well. The movie did really well because it was a good movie, and here's why it was a good movie. It's not just because it had this actor in it or this one person. It was a collection of things that were put together. So we're just going through a thing, and I think that they're not paying me for this opinion, but they could though.
Wait, hold on. We're paying you for this.
I think that if they want to get back to box office gold, and they want to. Well, here's the other thing: is the window for distribution is changed now too. I mean, you mentioned Titanic earlier, and I remember Titanic was out in theaters for like 50 weeks or something. It was long, and
yeah. If it succeeds, they bleed it out as long as. And possible.
Now with the rise in ticket prices have been kind of insane for a while, and it's getting even higher. I mean, hell, I can't take 4 kids to go see a movie. It's like it's $60 just to go see. We saw Cruella, and it's like. I remember when we went and saw that. So of course I'm kind of like I could go, or I could just wait until. Because it's going to be on, like, I mean, come on, Barbie came out in July. It's already on, and now we're in November, and it's been on Amazon for 2 months. Like already.
Oppenheimer is on Amazon right now,
but
too.
You can't stream it. Like you can if you rent it.
Yeah, you can.
If you rent
it, yeah. It doesn't. It's not Amazon Prime, whatever you call it, but you can still rent it at home.
But there was my understanding was that he put a restriction saying like, hey, Christopher Nolan had put a restriction saying like it needs to be out for X amount of time in theaters before we go into streaming.
Well, let's see if you and I could make movies where we get to tell the industry how long it gets to be there.
But yeah, wouldn't like mobile filmmaking, like right. I'm sure somebody out there would be like, oh, that's the death to cinema. Everybody could film everything on their phone and shit,
Well, that would take another episode. The stuff that people, well, because I was there at the beginning and people had so many misconceptions about it from the get-go. I remember this guy, messaging me on LinkedIn. Are you telling me, no, you can't watch movies on a little screen like that? What the hell? I'm so insulted. And I'm like, oh my God, that's not at all. I'm totally the opposite. I'm talking about putting him on the big screen. And then they don't want to hear it. People just get really stubborn. People get really touchy about this stuff. And I get it. There is an art, there is a science, and the technology having a place into it where it's in everybody's hands. This is where you guys who are listening to this come in. Like I was saying earlier, it's up to you. You got ideas. Just have to pick at least one. Build it, write it into a screenplay, get some people together and make that film. It's not only going to be I'm making a film and that's it, and then it'll be on YouTube. No, it's going to there's a flip side to that. how good you feel about making a film, completing a film. Joey and Ryan can attest to the fact that probably 1,000 years ago when they made their first film, when you were finished with that, what were you guys feeling? How good did that feel? How did that give you the confidence? I know we've already gone over time, but I want to end it with that. I don't want it to go on too long, but I want to end it with that because I think that's the icing on the cake. How good did you feel at the very end of the first project that you finished? And what did it do for you that inspired you? Because you can inspire yourself to say, I want to do it again. I'll start with Joey.
I think it's the idea of like creating. I think there was some sort of magic.
Way back when you started.
Yeah, like there is, because I still feel it now. Like the whole,
nice.
There's something about like this feeling, this thought that it really drives me forward. Like the idea that I had something that's like intangible, something that just lives in my head, right? And actually putting it into reality, something that people could see and watch, it's magic. It's it's like one of the, I'm sure this is my choice of creativity, and I know other creators have their own, but like something that you could create out of nowhere to make real, that's like, that's insane. If you really think about it, that's really insane, right?
Yep.
And I still feel that magic every time I do something. So
awesome.
Hooked on it.
Oh, I made my first short film when I was 16, 17. So I can't honestly tell you how I felt as a memory back.
Question.
But I had this conversation earlier this evening with Brandy, and I've never done a hard drug like cocaine, but I reckon that it feels the same. Like that's what I use that reference. I'm like, it's like making a movie is like taking a bump of crack. Like it nothing gives me higher than that.
Like euphoria.
Yeah, like I'm so in the last project that we just shot, this Frankenstein horror film. I mean, we were done at like 1 a.m. Everybody had to go to work the next day at a troopers for a crew, but I was up till like 3, 4, even though I also had to work in the morning. But like because I'm just so jazzed and so happy and excited with what we were doing.
That's how you know your passion. There was a kid at the trolley when I was going to one of the Comic Cons, and he said, how do you know your passion? Because he was graduating high school. And I said, do you know where you're going to do next? This is the kind of conversations I have with total strangers, okay? And this kid was like 17. And he says, no, actually, I don't have a clue. And I said, well, what's your passion? And he says, I don't know what my passion is. How do I know what my passion is? And then I said, well, basically, it's that thing that you do where you lose track of time and you feel like you could keep doing it forever. And he says, oh. And I said, do you feel that with anything? He's all video games. And I said, well, then if that's your passion, though, find a way into the video game industry, And he was like, oh. But he didn't know. A lot of people don't realize what passion is, but that gives you the energy to keep going, though, and to go that way. That's like a sign. It's like a sign. It's like, here's your road. Here's your journey. Here's your path. Here's your power. You know what I'm saying? Like your superpower.
No, yeah. It's I have another friend who he's an actor. Actually, Mike Solaris. He was in my feature film, and he was speaking on why one of his marriages didn't last, and he said that his wife was his wife, but the films were the mistress. And and so sometimes like even recently, like it's like I like the film is due, or it's like I'm not going to be normal again until I'm done, until it's out of my head and it's on the page, or it's until it's or until we film it. Like I'm not really going to be present with whatever we're talking about, because that's what I'm thinking about is the movie that we're working on or what the edit that I'm going to be doing later is, or so.
And it might be hard for you guys who are listening to even think about, that, oh my God, I don't think that could happen. If you've never made a movie before, make that movie that you want to make. Don't make somebody else's movie. You can help other people make their movies. Come up with your own. Come up with your own movies. There are a lot of people that make films and then they quit. They're going, that wasn't for me. Part of the reason is because you haven't made that story that really means something to you. And if you make the story that really, really connects with you in some way, then you'll feel the drive to make it. And when you do that and you make that, at the end, you are going to feel what these guys are saying. And no, it's not cocaine or your mistress. It's something that just overwhelms you, like what Joey was saying. And it's the best feeling in the world. And that's how you know you were meant to do it. But you'll only find out if you give it your best shot. And thank you for listening. I know this is coming out the day on the 28th. So we would have had Thanksgiving, but that's not going to stop us from wishing you a very happy Thanksgiving holiday if you're celebrating it. And if not, thank you so much for subscribing and listening to the show. Say goodbye to our listeners, guys.
All right,
catch you next time.